So, happy full moon and happy Uposatha for everybody. This week I've had a lot going on, a lot that I've been thinking about, and not all of it's been what we would normally put in the realm of Dhamma reflection. Some of it, and this is something you may find in your own practice, has been using the Dhamma as a lens to look at life. Yeah, life as it happens, life as it sort of descends upon us. And this is, it's not the worst thing, It's actually, this is what the Dhamma is for. This is what the fourth foundation of mindfulness is really about. So not every scenario in life is going to be we're in a Buddhist meditation context and people are only talking about the Four Noble Truths and everything is just suffering and the cause of suffering. No, we're going to go out into the world and we're going to have to figure out our way. We've got the frameworks. We've got the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, we've got the five aggregates, but it's really up to us to kind of take a situation that we're in and discern all the various components and figure out what to do, figure out the right course of action. And so what I've been thinking about is actually how that happens. And it occurred to me that it's very fundamental, and that is to say, their right view is obviously, it's a technical thing. It's, not having ignorance, but it's so much more. Like in our very approach to life and our knowledge, our inclination towards knowledge, towards truth, has to be our baseline in order to understand a situation in accord with Dhamma. Yeah. And so this is what's encouraged, Dhamma nu Dhamma Patipata, practicing Dhamma in accord with Dhamma. So how do we do this? And it's actually funny. It's inspired Jim, when I was visiting Jim recently for the day long in Princeton over the Thanksgiving holiday. Jim revealed that way back before I was born even, I think, he submitted a paper in college on Buddhist logic. And this was back in a time when it wasn't even cool yet to be a Buddhist. This was back when the very notion of Buddhist logic was something that was only discussed in very specific colleges devoted to Oriental studies. Yeah. But the very notion is interesting, that there is Buddhist logic. I don't think if it's something that Buddhist practitioners normally think about, but there's a framework to looking at the world that we do in practice. And it's not until it's really pointed out to us that we realize we're doing it. But maybe I can give an example of what that might look like. So Western society has, especially since like the 1500s was the 1700s, definitely with the Renaissance and into the Industrial Revolution, we have what's called the scientific method, which is you're trying to figure out something about the world. You make a hypothesis, you do an experiment, you get the results, and you use the results to either confirm or disprove your hypothesis. And it's very simplistic. I'm not professionally trained in this, but that's the idea. Yeah. You try to figure out how the world works in all of, the way this computer works, the way the internet works, the way anything works, the way a pen was constructed, it was built on these gradual understandings based on experimentation. Yeah. But it's also based on something more fundamental. You realize only when you've been exposed to a different way of doing things, that means that everything you have, everything you know is based on guesses. Yeah. That's what the hypothesis is. you're making a guess about the way things work, and then you use experiments to either prove or disprove your guess. Well, that means the bedrock of your understanding is confirmed guesses. They're still just guesses. And I think a good scientist will acknowledge that they are working with models. Yeah. They have a model of chemistry. They have a model of astrophysics. They have a model of quantum physics. And that the models keep changing because as the guesses help lead us onward into figuring out more of the subtleties of how something works, the model has to change. Yeah, because it was based on just a prediction of how things would go. And it's acknowledging that you don't really know. Yeah. And in terms of astrophysics, you know, you don't even get a chance to test many of the things, you know, or you're testing it and you're just really trusting that the number you see on the meter is accurately reflecting how the universe works, right? But then there's always exceptions that creep in, and you have to figure out in your model what you do with these exceptions. And so that's a big kind of brainy thing, but it's to say that this is what our society is kind of based on. And I'll give an example. Like if somebody were to ask you, what is the meaning of life? We might appreciate that the question seems to have validity. But this is something that in a Buddhist context would be productive of doubt. It would be productive of useless speculation, right? Because there's an inherent assumption. That assumption is that life has a meaning. Yeah. You wouldn't ask the question unless you assumed that life already had a meaning, because you're asking what that meaning is. And now all of that is to say that there is another way of doing things. And it's very curious because it involves the exact opposite of making guesses. And this is the process of Buddhist logic, or the process of Buddhist investigation. The way that the Buddha investigated and used his intelligence to figure out how things work is to start from what you know. And it's curious because the word science comes from the root to know, right? But it doesn't always refer directly to what's known. A lot of it refers to what's been confirmed, you know, the model you have. But what would it look like to start with what you know? Well, that's interesting, because what do you know? And again, you can ask that question in a way that leads to doubt. Well, I mean, what do I know? What is knowing? What, I mean, I only get data from my senses. And how do I know that they're giving me accurate data? How do I know that my eye is not lying to me? And that's not necessarily useful, right? Now we can know that, you know, our eye can, you know, be deceived. We can see a shape on the ground in front of us, and we can discern that that is a snake, but then we get closer to it and we see that's a garden hose. But was that a fault in the eye, or was that a fault in the perception? You know, that what was trying to figure out what it was seeing. The eye didn't actually have any problem. It discerned a shape and a color, and that was our basic experience. Yeah. And even to the point that, you know, we labeled it, you know, to some degree, the label was accurate, because what is a snake anyway? Well, it's a long tubular thing, but beyond that, we know as human beings that snakes move, they hiss, they eat rodents and frogs, they have scales, they're reptiles. There's a lot of things that make a snake a snake. Yeah, and a garden hose doesn't have these qualities. It only has a few of those qualities. Yeah. This also goes, Laura and I have been joking about AIs, and it's interesting with AIs are now doing images, they're doing text, and they can imitate humans really convincingly. But it's funny that it's always just an imitation, because you cannot train a computer to understand these basic fundamental rules of something. they can mimic, like a computer can draw a human and it can mimic what a human looks like based on millions of pictures of human beings, but it doesn't know that humans typically have 2 ears. And so every time you tell one of these AIs to make a picture of a monk, it always shows a monk with 1 ear. Yeah, 1 ear, because there's so few pictures of monks, and none of them are like straight on. You always see a monk like walking by you. Those are the only pictures you have on the web. So the computer doesn't know that monks have 2 ears. Yeah, you'd be like, how is that possible? But this is something that we've come to understand, and we've come to organize information. Yeah. So we know all the various qualities that a snake would have. And this is based on so many different experiences we've had that helps us locate, what that label applies to. But to some degree, what we do in meditation is to look at what we know, just look at what we're experiencing. Yeah. And this process actually necessitates that we begin to remove our guesses. And it's interesting. So the truth is the given, and the guesses are what have to be cleared out. So what do I mean by guesses? I mean assumptions, expectations, attachments, things that we want to be true about the situation, things that we assume are true about the situation. What are those based on? They're based on previous situations. Yeah? So if we're sitting in meditation and we hear a sound, we hear a bark, we can know as we're sitting here that was the sound of a bark, and we can know that the sound of a bark usually involves dogs. Yeah. And so we know there's a sound, and we know what that sound usually means. And if we let it stop there, then we've accurately reflected reality, both our objective reality, what was the sound, and our subjective reality, what do we know about that sound? Yeah. Now, what do we add on top of that? Well, that's the neighbor's dog, and it's always barking, and it's a very bad dog. It's disrupting my meditation, and it's doing this on purpose. Yeah, it always does it at this time of night. I wish they would just, keep it inside at this time of night, because it's always interrupting my meditation. That's all stuff that we're adding on top. Yeah. So this process of investigation means we've got to start with what we actually know. And based on what we know, we can start to connect that to what else we know about the situation, what else we know about the situation. And this is actually, it will get us to a point where we reach the edge of what we know. And if we can stop at that point, then we are within the realm of truth. We are within the realm of what we know about the situation. And from there, nothing else needs to be done. So most of our difficulties, most of our suffering in life is happening because of things that are added on that are not actually there. Yeah, the stories and the expectations and the greed, hatred, and delusion. So this process of mindfulness, the reason, we say, okay, now sit down, and now, just follow your breath, breathe in, breathe out, listen to the sounds around you and let them go. We're training and being with simple reality. And when we get up off the cushion and we move from one activity to the next, and we say, be mindful. What are you doing? I'm walking, I'm sitting, I'm drinking tea. The simplest possible label, and knowing that we're labeling. In fact, one of the basic meditation techniques is to simply apply your own labels to the activity. A simple label. I am lifting my foot, I'm putting my foot down. I am opening a box. Okay, I'm looking in the box. And that's the sort of what we call the Mahasi method, is this style of mindfulness practice that was developed in the last century. Yeah. And it works. Yeah. Not as a lifestyle necessarily, but as a process of training, right? Because this is what we want to be able to do, not necessarily for every little activity. We can be, to some degree, we can go with what we know, we can go with what we're used to. You know, our habitual activities are only a problem when we do them on autopilot. It's not wrong to do the same thing every day. It's not wrong to hear a bark and be like, that's a dog. Again, if we started questioning the most basic things, including our own understanding of a situation, we would just be filled with doubt. And that's not productive. But this skill is most useful when it gets applied to a situation where we've added extra stuff. Yeah. Or where we're telling ourselves that something is not possible. So a lot of this reflection has come up because actually, while I'm here in the city, I've been going to see doctors, and it's very interesting getting to meet doctors, and you know they're investigating like you know, oh, how's your heart doing? How's your liver doing? You know, what are you going through on a day-to-day basis? And it's occurred to me that as Buddhist practitioners, we are absolutely guaranteed to have to apply this process of investigation in a way that people in the world are not. So, you know, I went to the doctor and I said, you know, my skin is itching. And it was very interesting that I say, I think I'm allergic to something. And they did a blood test and it comes back negative. And they're like, you're not allergic. And that was it. And it seems so cut and dry, right? And you're smiling. Everybody's probably had this experience where, you know, a doctor does a test. They had a hypothesis, you know, perhaps you're itching because of an allergy. They get the piece of paper. It tells them that, you know, this particular marker didn't come up. And so you don't have an allergy. Your itching is coming from something else. But those of us who have who've had an allergy, we're like, no, that's not satisfying. I'm sorry, doctor, but it sounds very smart, but I'm itching. I'm itching. Please help me do something about it. And it was fascinating because there's a possibility that you can use the scientific method and still fail to address the actual problem, right? You've really you've told yourself what it can't be, right? But is that productive, or is that just reductive? You've tried to limit the number of things it could be, but you haven't actually discovered what it is. And now, again, did you really disprove what it could be? Like, is it possible to have an allergy and yet the test comes back and says you didn't react on the test? Well, I mean, are tests 100% proof positive? And what is the test anyway? The test is looking at averages. Yeah. So the test comes back with a number, and the number is within a range. But who set the range? The range was established based on doing this test on hundreds or thousands or millions of people, and that gave a range. But is that truth? No, it's still just probability. And so it's very interesting is that a doctor can think that they ruled out that you're allergic to something, but they haven't really. Yeah, is they're assuming that you couldn't possibly fall outside of this range. And so what would it, but again, you know, this is the medical profession is hard. Yeah. You get a person come to you and they're suffering, and it's your one function is to help them with that suffering. Yeah. And you've got to figure out, based on the billions of things that could be wrong with them, which thing is wrong with them, or at least develop a process. Yeah. But it's important that this is what we do in everything. Yeah. A car mechanic does this, you know, a realtor does this, a banker does this, you know, you do this to figure out how to do your taxes. You do this to figure out what kind of shoes you're going to buy. Yeah, you look at what you need and what will serve your purposes, but you look at what you've got too, and you try to figure out, will this thing suffice or will it not? Should I get this model or this model? Ultimately, you don't really know. You're trying to apply some strategy, yeah, and you're going to have to accept the results. I think it's useful for us to recognize that uh, truth can be what we start from. Yeah. And I don't know, I was thinking, it's like, is there any other way to do this medical process, yeah, than the way it's currently done? And I'm like, well, absolutely, right? Like, as a person with itchy skin, I can say, well, that's not good enough. Yeah. I believe it's possible I can, be allergic to something and not show up on a test, but I'm willing to believe there are other answers, right? So, but what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to investigate, yeah? And I'm going to try a cream. I'm going to try changing my diet. I'm going to try changing my clothing. I am going to see if I'm itching in the morning and see if I'm itching in the evening. I'm going to experiment, and I'm going to read, and I'm going to ask other people what their experience is. Yeah. Investigating. And it's very interesting that there's really no end to this. Yeah. You don't just like solve the problem and it's gone. Because when you've come at it from like this like, what do I know? Okay, and what has worked and what else has worked? When you build up this repertoire of kind of small truths. Okay, well, this helped, this did not. So let's do this and see if we can find something else that helps. You're learning a skill. You're applying this sense of investigating and fixing a problem, but also getting better at something. Like, you're eliminating the cause of the problem. That's something that's going to persist. If you were merely fixing a symptom and then you're done and just wait till the next symptom comes up, well, that doesn't carry on. Yeah. The next symptom can be slightly different, and you have to run the same series of tests to see if it's the same thing. And so this is the medical profession. And I mention it just because, well, you're all human beings too. So as Buddhist practitioners, sooner or later, you're going to find yourself experiencing aging, sickness, and death. And you're going to go to somebody and you're going to be like, why? And they're going to maybe try to help you. But I suspect sooner or later, you're going to have a situation where they won't be able to. And this is where our Buddhist practice really like shines, because that's basically the definition of the Four Noble Truths. Yeah. Aging, sickness, and death are going to happen. They're not something that you solve. Yeah. They're the sort of problems that you dissolve, you get used to, you understand, you accept, you realize that these are expected, that they're natural parts of life. They become part of the whole. Yeah. But I was trying to think, not to have this be too abstract. There's something, there must be something that each and every one of you has used this process for. And then it just came to me, like, you've all tried meditation, right? Which means you had to sit down and you had to sit still. Yeah. So probably every single Buddhist practitioner, gets introduced to the meditation exercise. Yeah. Okay. Sit still, try to be mindful, try and stay in the present moment, try not to get distracted. And when you do, bring yourself back to the present moment. Basic exercise. But in order to do that, you have to put your body somewhere, right? It's unfortunate. We can't just like throw it in the closet and then it just be the mind. And the mind won't have any problem, just it doesn't have aches and pains. It doesn't need the leg, the mind doesn't have a leg that falls asleep. The body does. Yeah, but what happens when we try to figure out how to sit in meditation for any length of time? Well, we start to get an ache in our shoulders and our back. Yeah, if we try to sit cross-legged, and for a number of us, we find that, no, that's this, ouch, this is not comfortable at all. This is not working. But if you've ever been to a traditional monastery, you find sometimes there are no chairs, right? It's just everybody's on the ground, and people have grown up in this kind of culture and this expectation, and they go to sit in meditation and they all get up into the full lotus, yeah, just like the Buddha statues, and that's the thing to do. But now, what is it if you can't do that? What is it if that's excruciating, right? So this is that process, and it's very interesting that you can be told the best posture is the lotus posture, right? But now, is that truly the best posture? Well, I mean, it can be technically, the best, the most stable, the most energized posture, and yet be unattainable for you. So therefore, it's not the best posture. And so you go and you try it, and many of us, I think, probably try it, and it's just you can't get your leg up that far. So you're like, well, what's the next best thing I can do? And you try that, but maybe you find that your knee starts to hurt, or you're just shifting constantly, or it just takes too much energy. You're very tense, and then you've spent the entire meditation tense. But the teacher keeps telling you, no, the goal is to relax. The goal is to be comfortable and awake. And so you've got this, the teacher's trying to guide you, and you've got all of this data coming from outside, and yet your actual experience is not matching it. Yeah. So this is this process of investigation that we all have to do. And this is where we realize that our practice is going to find us in situations where nobody can help us. Yeah. I mention this because each and every one of you will be in these situations again and again and again, where you have to go against what other people are telling you. Yeah, and you have to be able to critically think and say, like, okay, yeah, everybody is saying that this works, but it's not working for me. So I've got to find another way. What is the thing that I'm trying to do? Yeah. And that what we do a process of investigation, like what gets me closer to that goal. Yeah. So probably many of us are I mean, not to call you out, Rahul, but many of us, once we try the whole upright, stiff back, lotus posture, and we realize I'm in excruciating pain, we try to go the other way, yeah? And we're like, okay, no, relaxing is the way to go. And we kind of like sink back, and then we fall asleep. Yeah, our energy is just all muddled. And we're like, well, that wasn't as painful, but it also wasn't, I didn't get much out of it, right? And so we've got these two different things that we know aren't working. Sooner or later, if we keep trying, we're going to find something that seems to work. We get some amount of time comfortable, but not tense, energized enough to be awake. And we're actually able to do the meditation exercise. And it could be one cushion, it could be like 10 cushions. Like, I'm always making fun of people with their little pillow forts, in the retreat center, where they have to prop up their elbow because it's a bad elbow, and like their one knee has to be at a certain height, and they come with these like bags of cushions, and they stack them all up. But you can only make fun of that to a point, because in fact, what that person has done, they didn't start that way. You never see people start by building up a little fort of cushions. That's something you do once you've come to know suffering. That's something you do once you actually tried to sit and you experienced pain. Then you start adding the cushions. Anybody who like goes into the temple and says, okay, yeah, no, I'm not going to sit on the floor. I'm going to sit over there, all nice and comfortable. Let me get totally chilled out, and then give me the meditation instructions. Nobody does that, because they know that that's not going to really be that effective. Yeah. So they try and do it in the most strenuous way possible, and then they learn to ease themselves back. Yeah. So this is one example. If you haven't found it yet, then you are doing this process, yeah? And when you find something that helps, keep doing it. And it doesn't matter if other people are telling you, yeah, you should be able to wean yourself off of that. The best posture is to be sitting on the floor with your legs all pretzeled up. And that's the way that real people meditate. But you'll just have to look them in the eye and smile and say, yeah, I'm working towards it, but I don't know if I'll get there in this life. Yeah. And be able to accept that maybe you won't. Yeah. It would be nice to be able to sit like the Buddha statue. But the Buddha statue is made of brass. Yeah, he doesn't have aches and pains. But you do. So you've got to find a posture that is not going to be a hindrance to meditation. And now you can apply this to your diet. Yeah, so we, as Buddhist monks, we show up at the monastery, and then we're on the 8 precepts, which means you have a 6-hour window where you can eat substantial food, and the other 18 hours you do not. You can drink liquids. You can have medicinal substances like coffee or cocoa or juice. But otherwise, yeah, no. So there's so many strategies to trying to make this work. I think fundamentally you find at some point it doesn't work. Like you're not thriving and satiated and replete with all your vitamins and minerals like you would be if you were eating 3 or 5 or 7 meals a day. And I say because there are people who eat that many meals because that's maybe they have some condition that necessitates that. You get to a monastery and they say, okay, no, you've got to make it work within this window. You're gonna try huge meals. You're gonna try tiny meals. You're gonna try eating at dawn and right before midday. You're gonna try eating one big meal right in the middle of that time. You're gonna try like 4 meals stretched out. You're gonna try everything, and you're gonna see that some things just categorically don't work. Like eating like 8 large, like just eating the entire 6 hours. Categorically that doesn't help. Yeah, the other 18 hours are not going to be that great in terms of meditation and mindfulness and a sense of well-being. But also not eating, not very sustainable. Yeah, even though eating is a bit of a chore, you're gonna have to it's a necessary chore. Yeah. So you're going to experiment, you're going to find what works. Now, if we read the newspapers and such, we're going to hear stuff every day, every week about what's good for us. Yeah. But then we're just going to look at how does something make us feel when we eat it. Now, I know many of you have like food sensitivities. That's what life is like in the modern day. It's not something new. It's just we've never had access to so many different kinds of food. Back in the day, you only had like these things available to you. So you either ate it or you didn't. You moved somewhere and you changed your diet. But now we have access to everything, but not everything is good for us. But no matter what people tell us about what is healthy, it's up to each of us to investigate. This leads to my health and this does not. Yeah. And not to go with the worldly winds, as we say, praise and blame, success and failure, gain and loss, pleasure and pain. Yeah. These are the things that people are chasing, constantly moving from one extreme to the next. Learning to let them go is as simple as paying attention. Well, what do I know? I know that eating this makes me feel bad. And somebody can say, well, it should be, this shouldn't be possible. Yeah, it's a healthy thing. And you say, well, it doesn't matter if it shouldn't be possible because I've experienced it. Yeah. So the Buddha, the famous saying in the Kalama Sutta, the Buddha goes to the Kalamas and they're like, we've got all these different teachers saying all these different things. What are we to believe? And he's like, it's good. It's good that you're asking this question. You shouldn't believe things just based on tradition or because you were told or because it's the, it makes, even because it makes logical sense. Instead, when you see for yourself, this is unwholesome, it leads to unwholesome qualities, you should abandon it. This is wholesome, it leads to wholesome qualities, wholesome results, then you should cultivate it. And we do this. This is our practice, yeah? To pay attention to what we're experiencing and to always be investigating, yeah? Not guessing necessarily, but trying things, yeah? Always keeping our feet firmly planted on what we know. These Four Noble Truths are a pretty solid basis, and it's the Buddha's understanding was based on these, yeah? He looked at what was happening. He was experiencing suffering, and that was a given, yeah? And he asked, where is it coming from? And so he investigated and analyzed until he saw the causal link. And it's important because that link is invisible. We can't see that our craving is leading to our attachment. There's no string that attaches the two, yeah? But we can experience that. We can note that whenever we have this craving arise, we start to feel tension, and our mind starts to feel boxed in. It starts to feel like this is the only way we can act. This is the only thing we can get to be happy, yeah. And we start to find that it's like, this is what I am. This is. I mean, it's never been any other way. Like, okay. We can see this again and again and again, and then we start to know there actually is a causal link here. One thing is conditioning the next. And it doesn't matter if other people tell us, that's not the way it works. If we've seen it, then this is what we have to go on. We can learn more, which develops our understanding of this causal link. And hopefully we can overcome it. Yeah, that's what we're really trying to learn about. But always based on what we're actually experiencing. Never based on what I want from practice, or what I think I should be getting, or what the right thing to do is. But always, what is unwholesome? Abandon it. What leads to unpleasant results? Abandon it. What is wholesome? Cultivate it. What leads to pleasant results? Cultivate it. It really can be that simple. And when you start living that way, this is a Buddhist logic, yeah? This is true. When this was, and this is what we call the Buddha's basic formulation of dependent origination, when this arises, that arises. With the arising of this comes to be. When this ceases, that ceases. With the cessation of this, that comes not to be, yeah? This is Buddhist logic, yeah? It's paying attention to what's actually happening. When this is here, and all the time that this is here, if this comes to be, you're just like, oh, okay. Seems like those two are linked. We can work with that, yeah? And so, yeah, as I said, we don't quite know what's going to come out with the Dhamma talk, and because I've been with a bunch of doctors, this has been what's going through my head. It's like, why won't you just Google it? It's like any child can try to figure out a problem. Don't just take what every doctor knows, like this can't be this, like trying to figure out. So this is what my week has been. And so this has been going through my head, but always through the lens of Dhamma, like, isn't this interesting? Yeah. Because when you start to look, you see that this particular problem is related to people's meditation cushions, is related to people's diets, is related to, well, everything that we're doing. Oh, it's all connected, yeah? And that becomes the theme, on and on. What you know develops more of what you know, develops more of what you know, and before you know it, you actually get what's going on, yeah? And at that point, it doesn't matter if other people are telling you you're crazy, or what is it you're doing? You're wasting your life. And you're like, Maybe so. Their opinion doesn't even shake you because you're standing firmly on what you know, what's substantial, what you've experienced, what you have confidence in. And I think I hope for all of you that we were talking about chanting and the bowing and all of the rituals and what it's like when you've actually had some gains in practice. And then you find yourself going up to the statue and going, thank you, Buddha. And you realize that suddenly you're standing on a substantial truth. The practice is not hypothetical anymore. Like you actually got something from it. And then if somebody says, yeah, Buddhism, bah, you know, what good is this? You're like, well, it's some good. You know, I can't say categorically it's good for everybody, but I've gotten something from it. There was a causal link there, yeah. And may you all find, you know, these gains and these joys to stand confidently on. May you get that experience, yeah. And may you be able to find more and more truth in your life, yeah. And let go of the guesses. Like, how does this world work? Just let that go, yeah. Don't operate on supposition, but just stick with what's right here in front of you, and then build on that. So for just thought for your reflection on this full moon night, I hope some of this can be useful, and whatever isn't useful, whatever didn't inspire you or enthuse you or guide you in any way, just throw it away.